Okay, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. I feel like there's an echo. 1 second, technical issues. Okay, perfect. Thank you everyone for being here at today's research seminar. My name is Cinnamon Moffett, and I am the research program manager here at Oregon State University's Hatfield Marine Science Center located in Newport, Oregon. That sounds a little weird for the folks that are in the room, but this is a hybrid event. So we also have a bunch of folks that are online. For those folks that are online, we have Roseanne, who is here to answer any of your technical questions. So feel free to put any questions into chat. We also have students that are taking seminar for class. And so your instructor, Michael Banks, is here. And so if you are a student, you can put questions in for Michael and Dr. Banks, and he will get to you and answer those questions. So a couple of logistics just to talk about for folks in the room. That was me. Again, I thought we turned that off. Right, it's an example. Make sure you turn your phones off. See? Okay, there we go. So for the folks in the room, if you have a question, you need to raise your hand and somebody will bring you a mic. You need to be able to have the mic so that folks online can hear your questions. So those in the back of the room, just raise your hand and we'll bring you a mic and we'll get up there as soon as we can. For folks that are online, if you have a question, just put it in chat at any time and we'll read those questions out so our presenters can hear that. I wanted to do a couple of quick announcements about events that are coming up. If you haven't yet heard, next Wednesday, we have a Science on Tap that'll be in this room with the Big Fish Lab. They're going to be talking about sharks in Oregon and then doing a dissection in this room. So we are really excited about that. And we are playing with technology to have cameras in place so that no matter where you're sitting in this room or if you're online, you'll get a front row view of the dissection. So I hope you join us for that. If you have any questions about how to join online, you can go to the HMSC homepage, scroll to the bottom, and there is a calendar of events there with all of the login information you need for those events. We also have a seminar next week. That would be Thursday, same place, same time, when Graham Shaw is going to come talk to us about, I have to remember, tidal wetland social economic evaluations. So we are switching topics, but excited to have Graham come and talk to us. So hopefully you'll come and join us next week. But while you're all here today, because we have exciting technology, we have 3 speakers. I'm going to do really quick introductions for all of our speakers, and then I'm going to hand it off to them. So we have Shawn Rowe, who engages in research on free choice learning with Sea Grant. He has a background in applied linguistics and developmental psychology and education and holds a PhD from Washington University in St. Louis. We also have Susan Rowe, who is here with OSU's Precollege Program. She holds a doctorate degree in environmental science with a focus on environmental education from OSU. We also have Ford Evans here, and he earned his bachelor's degree from Pitzer College and a master from Auburn in aquaculture and allied fisheries, and his PhD from Oregon State University. So we have some beavers in the room. And with that, I'm actually just going to hand it off because they have a lot they're going to share with us. And I'm going to let them get started. So welcome to our speakers.
Thank you, Cinnamon. Thank you for having us here today. My name is Shawn Rowe. I work for Oregon Sea Grant here at Hatfield in Corvallis. Two points of order. When you came in, you probably saw, for those of you online, you didn't, obviously, we have a bunch of the VR headsets here. So when we're done, if you would like a chance to see what the experiences look like in the VR headset, please come down and use them. And if they're all in use and you want to wait around for a few minutes, we got time. We can hang out till you use them. We have wipes to wipe them down with before you trade them off. So you will have a chance to get your hands on those and look at them if you want. If the VR headset makes you motion sick, you can also see the same thing on the iPad. I will be demonstrating them up here so you can see what it looks like, how it works, but you get a chance to try it out yourself. You can also, at the door when you came in, and for those of you online, there will be a QR code at some point. You can grab the sticker and download the thing on your own phone or tablet as well. We are, I've sold this to you as a talk on coastal hazards virtual reality experience. The actual reality of that experience is that we just got the money to start it. It's just starting as an effort. And so what I want to do, I don't have the VR of coastal hazards to show you yet. So what we're going to do is show you an aquaculture app that the same team built that we are building from and on. So you get to see that. You get to hear from Ford Evans, who was the content expert on that, from Susan and her team who put it together. And then I will talk about how we are adapting what they did and moving that forward with our coastal hazards piece and what that's going to look like, and get you excited enough about that by this time next year, you'll come back to see it in person in another seminar. Great. So that's all that I needed to say up front. I'm going to, I should add to that, the Coastal Hazard app has been funded by NOAA because of seeing actually the aquaculture app. We shared that with them and they said, yes, go, run, do this. And of course, we didn't know how to do it, so we turned to the people who did it. And so I'm going to actually turn the presentation over to Susan to talk a little bit about the larger project, the Dive for Ag Distance Immersive Virtual Education USDA project that this all came from.
Okay, do I need to be on that blue? You made me try to advance it for me. So hi, everyone. It's good to be here. It's been a while since I've been here before, some familiar faces. When I was a PhD student here at OSU, I did a lot of my work at the Touch Tank here at Hatfield. So it was a great time of my life. Now I live at Precollege Programs at Oregon State and direct a handful of K-12 programming and teacher professional development designed to broadening participation in STEM. So you get the short name of Dive for Agriculture. The name and the actual proposal was much longer than that and very boring. So the team came up with something that would be a little more catchy than the big name we gave the USDA. So these was one of 8 national grants awarded by USDA during the COVID pandemic. Those are rapid response grants designed to provide rapid programming for K-12 audiences. Our team got together. This is very rapid call. They announced this grant and we only had 3 weeks to submit it, which meant that you needed to have some partnerships already in place and some ideas already really strong in place to be able to implement it. So I had some partnerships with a company called Time Looper. They do virtual augmented reality software programs. And at the time of the pandemic, they were working really heavily with national parks, museums, zoos, sites, state parks all around the nation and internationally, building those virtual reality experiences that people during the pandemic could experience those sites. Because we were already engaged in these conversations through the many networks in environmental education and the National Association for Interpretation, we had an idea that was very ambitious and a way to do it, and I needed some partners. So I sat down with folks from Extension and 4-H at OSU to say, do you have the experts to bring into the table that would be able to dream this up with us? We wanted to do something that would be more than a Zoom meeting, something that would be more than just sit with the students for 15 minutes and that's it. We wanted to dream up something that could stay long-term and that could be built from, and that's how that started. So what you see on the screen is the tabletop for the aquaculture app. The Ford was a centerpiece for. This is what you see when you actually put the VR sets and you can actually walk into the spins and have your own virtual kind of field trip experience. I'll tell you, as you're experiencing that, these are designed for middle school age children and educators to use in the classroom. We also design lesson plans that go along with this. This is like a first exposure to thinking about farm to table agriculture components. So that's the audience is designed for that. So it's meant to be just a once kind of exposure to that, and then a lot of other things go along with that. So what we developed was an agriculture toolkit. Those VR experiences, there's 5 of them that we're creating. 4 of them are completely done and available. You can download them on your phone and iPad and experience by yourself. They're free and available for anyone. The 5th one will be completed this month. We never thought we got here, right? But we did. Along with that, we're developing lesson plans that educators can use before youth go in and do these experiences or after, and they're things that are complementary to the topics. Before we got to the virtual reality field trips, the team, I have 2 halftime coordinators, Emily Nicholson, who is in my pre-college programs office, and Kristen Moore, who is online, I believe, and I'll call her out a little bit, who is our halftime coordinator for the 4-H part of it. And they work really hard into developing a Teens as Teachers program. 2 of those apps were heavily done with co-creation with youth, with teens. We brought them in a 6-week program where they were receiving training, working with the experts, leading the science cafes online, talking about these topics, and actually creating some of the content that were implemented in the app. So it was an important part of the project, the co-creation of the voice, something done for youth by youth. So Kristen and Emily led that Teens as Teachers program and the Ag Science Cafes that went around in there, and we did educator professional development to introduce them to the topics and to the apps and how to use them. These, when you go and download that on your phone and iPad, and it works in Androids and all of that. And as Shawn said, you have the chance to look at the VR sets. If you use the experience on the VR sets, it's completely immersive. So you're there in the middle of a farm, the cow is running by you, and you have to remember that you can just take them off. You don't have to run and scream. But if the VR set's not for you, and I have to confess, it's not for me. I can last 5 minutes in that and I get really motion sick on that. Anyone can access that on your iPhone and iPad, and you walk towards it. It's not as immersive, but you still have access to the content that way. So when you download, go to the Time Looper platform, and Shawn is going to demonstrate that later. We have now a Oregon State University platform among all of the national parks, museums, international sites. And you go in each one of them, you can download it and experience it. So we did one on agroecology, urban farms, dairy farm, farm-to-table cheese factory. We did horse farming stable, the oyster, and the last one that we're finishing is a rangeland. It's USDA, it's agricultural topic. So those are all towards agricultural topics and that, but we're really happy that we were able to include the aquaculture piece in this and have an expert on board to help us out, because it's not normally what is in this kinds of grants. So learning objectives in general for those for is to give those young people access to learning that demonstrate how agriculture has evolved to the 21st century. For the aquaculture piece, that was even more important, because anybody can go to a farm and walk into and see a cow and see other things. Not a lot of people can really see an oyster underwater or what's happening under there. So this was even more poignant, I think, on the aquaculture, to kind of see those microscopic levels of things that you wouldn't be able to see even if you were there in person. So we want to connect them to the ways that agriculture impacts communities from farm practices. So this is designed to tell a story. In a way, it's not a collection of facts. It's telling a story of how the cheese came from the big scale farm to small scale farms to artisan cheese production, and the careers that are connected to along the pathway in the ecosystem. Right. So as I said, I worked with Time Looper. Is the company that was like, well, there's no way that we can do this fast without people that really know what they're doing, and they're working as intellectual partners with education institutions. They're working for education products who are creating things for educators. So they came in as partners to put this together in the app that you're gonna see today. I'll repeat this later, and the stickers also has the QR code that will take you to the places where you can download it and explore them on your own later on. But we wanted to tell a little bit of the story of how the magic was made, right? We had a very ambitious idea. We were not sure we knew how to do this. We definitely didn't know how to do this. But we had a very good team of people between the educators, the science experts, and the technology people that really spent a whole year figuring it out, how to create something that would be engaging, relevant for the youth. There's a lot of negotiation, what it is that we need to tell. In a 3-minute experience, we cannot say everything that we want to say. So how do you define, how do you scope, what is important to them, how we make it meaningful, engaging, relevant to the audience? So it's a whole learning that we did in our own, and I think Kristen online can talk about that a little bit, and so does Ford. This is our own learning process and how to create a product in a cross-disciplinary way. Yes.
I'm going to go ahead and demo the app for you so you can see what it looks like. Can you stop your screen share? And I'm going to do it on my iPad, handy dandy iPad. You will see it up there. And I'm just going to walk through the whole process. Can you hold this? Thanks. Maybe talk about what I'm doing. Let me share my screen.
So if you're an educator and in your classroom, you'll be able to do the same thing that he's doing here, projecting on the screen so everyone can travel the place with you, but not necessarily being there on their own devices. Yeah. So what you see in there is the Time Looper online platform. So all of those are apps that you can go and access for free. They were developed with museums, state parks, natural sites, all of that. So OSU now has a platform along with everything else. And the Dive for Ag apps.
Oysters are animals that live attached to the ocean floor. At first glance, it may look like oysters are just stationary rocks, but they are vital to the ocean ecosystem.
Yeah. So every app will have a little intro that kind of say, this is what you're about to see and experience. And then you go in and you scan it kind of anywhere you are. Right now, you're scanning the floor and the thing pops up in front of you. And you actually walk with your iPad or iPhone towards those pings. And with iPhone and iPad, it's less immersive, so you kind of have to forget everything that you're seeing around it outside of the screen. But if you're wearing the VR sets, you are completely immersed there.
Some of you might recognize where we are, where we're standing and looking at right now. This is right off the Bay Road in Newport with some additions from Whiskey Creek. So I'm just going to actually show some of the pins. So what you do when you're in the app or when you're walking through like this or in the VR is you interact with these pins which have content. So I'm going to hit a few of the pins. I'm going to have Ford and Susan and even Kristen maybe direct a little bit of that or talk about what you're seeing there. But that will demonstrate some of the different ways that the content is presented in the app. I'm going to start because this oyster is right here in front. Yeah, go ahead.
Before I start that, what to show is and we'll talk about it a little bit later, to get to this, there was a lot of work involved in process, and we'll demonstrate that. And those pins, there are different kinds of content, whether it is a 3:6 video that takes you to a place or a hologram or a 3D model, all kinds of contents can be put in there, right? There are different ways of registering the message. You're heavily involved in that. You know more than I do about that.
All right, so this is a hologram of a oyster. And the idea is you can go around it and click on these pins. Here we're sort of talking about oysters in general, so their biology would be covered in this sort of component here. So oyster larvae, we see swim.
Start their lives as swimming animals. For the first 2 to 4 weeks of their lives, oysters swim around looking for a place to attach. This is where they will stay and grow for the rest of their lives. Young oysters also develop a foot-like appendage to help them crawl along the seafloor and find the best place to grow.
Like tadpoles, very young oysters can swim. When oysters are about 2 to 4 weeks old, they stop swimming and find a place to attach and grow. One of their favorite places to attach is on clean, empty oyster shells. Piles of oyster shells with growing young oysters.
That was my don't quit my day job moment. I'm glad I'm not wearing the same clothes as well, so that's good. And it is deliberately non-linear, which actually was a shift for me. You can bounce around
Oysters
anywhere
grow
here.
to adulthood in different ways, including spreading them along the seafloor. Oyster larvae attach to clean, empty oyster shells, or colch,
This is a
grow to
360
market
video,
size
so
on the
he's spinning
seafloor after
around
2
and you can
years.
see
The
us
longer
in
an
the
oyster
background.
grows, the bigger it gets. Some people like the taste of large oysters. Oyster farmers make decisions to let oysters on the seafloor grow longer than 2 years. When it is time to harvest, oyster farmers dredge oysters along the seafloor
so you can
and
explore
transport
this
them
at your
to the
pace. So what
processing
you're
pier
seeing is
on their
how
boats.
fast he's moving around it to see it. So it's not how you record it, it's your pace as you walk through this.
Yeah, so we did have to incorporate 2 different farms, Whiskey Creek Shellfish Hatchery and Oregon Oyster Farm, to capture the whole life cycle of the oysters. Logistically, we then had to squish them both together along the Bay Road. So for those of you who know Whiskey Creek, it's not.
What we do here all starts out here in Netarts Bay. We pump raw seawater out of the bay through these cylinders
And so Sean's
that you see
spinning
behind me,
around
which
and
are
taking a
full
look
of
at
sand.
Netarts Bay.
So these
here.
are sand filters, which remove large particles from
That's
the
Alan
incoming
Barton,
water. The ocean is
factory
full
manager.
of tiny little microscopic critters that we don't necessarily want in our tanks. So we filter those out and then pump the water on into the hatchery. We pump about 200 gallons a minute of water all day, every day for about 10 months out of the year. Once
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes oyster meat is sold without the shell. The process of opening the oyster and removing the meat is called shucking. This is done using a knife to cut the muscle that holds the 2 shells together. An expert shucker can process a dozen oysters in just 1 minute.
Sean spins
Here at the
around,
Oregon
you can
Oyster
see
Farm, the crew can shuck
pile
5
of
to
oysters they're working
7,000
on.
oysters in a day.
I'm basically just moving around until I can see the pin I want to hit it.
what we do here all starts out.
There is chemistry in raising oysters too. Increased levels of
Oh, the larval tank? Yeah, so that will be raising oyster larvae.
So I'm currently inside a big 8,000 gallon larval tank. So typically we will fill this tank with warm seawater and put in 30 to 40 million baby oysters at a time.
So
we feed them lots and lots of microalgae while they're in the tank, and that means they produce a lot of waste.
Someone who visits
So
the
as a
farm will
result,
never
we
be
need to
able
drain each of these
here.
tanks every 48 hours. We drain all of the water out and collect the larvae on mesh screens, and then transfer them to a new tank of clean water. So there's a lot.
Kristen, maybe we unmute Kristen a little bit from the Zoom so she can introduce. Kristen worked really hard with Ford and Emily on that, and she can tell you a little bit about the experiences. We did bring the youth to the sites with us. They did experience that in presence. I know that I wasn't there the day, but they ate quite a bit of oysters that day, and I want to have to share a little bit of the experience of building this aquaculture app with us. If Kristen, I think you should be able to talk if you're there.
Hey, folks.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, hi, my name is Kristen Moore. I work for 4-H over in the North Willamette region. If you didn't know this about me, I am a huge oyster lover. And so when we did this filming site, everybody that was around me quickly learned that I probably ate 10 pounds of oysters. that day. But this was probably one of the most interesting and challenging experiences building this virtual reality app, mainly because young people, kids in middle school, probably never tried an oyster. So we really needed to give them the framework to understand an oyster as an organism, how it grows, but then also all the different people that are involved in growing that and telling that story. So this app was a little bit different. Usually people have experiences with cows in some sense. Maybe they've seen a cow or have tried dairy products like ice cream or cheese, maybe grow tomatoes in their backyard, or have seen movies or rode a horse in their life. For this one, not a lot of kids have experiences with oyster. So that was one of the coolest challenges so far in this project. Also working with Ford, I quickly became a mini tiny expert myself. So Ford was a fantastic person to partner with, of just being so knowledgeable, super responsive partner, and going through this reiterative cycle to build out this app, because this is a very tough thing to create, because it's not like you can go to a classroom to talk to middle school kids and you can introduce things in a very linear process, which a lot of educators are comfortable in that kind of fashion. This is tough because you may only have a kid's attention for 30 seconds. And they may go and explore things in a different order. So you always had to make sure that no matter what pin they selected, they had the information needed to understand and really engage with that content. So there were parts of it that were really reiterative. We really kind of went back and forth a lot to really just hone down of how do you grab a kid's attention, and really just boil it down to those few points. And so that was one of the coolest parts. Also too, we did get to bring kids to this site, which was phenomenal. Everybody at Oregon Oyster Farm were really great partners. They really leaned into being educators themselves. So teaching us like how to shuck oysters, taking us out on the barge on the water, walking us through the processing pier. It was really an immersive, life-changing experience for the kids that were able to join us. They got to take the oyster larvae and put them in the setting tank. So there were kids that were involved actually in the filming for this one. And we did have a couple of the youth that were the audio narrators for this. So we had some really cool experiences with kids. There was one kid that kind of came into this field experience being like, "Ooh, don't know how I feel about oysters," but definitely became an oyster lover towards the end and was able to try a couple in different ways. So that was a really fantastic thing to kind of see, where kids stepped out of their comfort zone a little bit with the help of everybody else.
Thank you, Kristen. So you just got a little glimpse of what this app looked like. You can explore every pin later as you wish with the VR sets, but that was a lot of work that went behind that. This is like kind of like we create this app. For me as an academic, it was a little bit different to think about scholarship on this and how the credits go, but it's kind of like a movie production. Pretty much, this is the amount of people involved into creating this, from me as the project PI and director and other co-directors. This is the first time that Precollege Programs really had an intentional partnership with 4-H into doing something together. So that was good in itself for us to learn how to do that. Then there's what are the content experts, creators and writers, the people deciding what do we tell, how do you tell it, and how do we incorporate the voices of the youth in the way that we tell that story. And then there are the videographers, photographers, Time Looper team who created all the animations and 3D models and software and all of that. So quite a number of people involved in a long process to really be integrated and intentional in designing something that merged the best of all of our academic worlds. You're going to talk a little bit about serving as a content expert. So this was like for beginning to end, it was like about 1.5 years of work.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I must say, serving as the content expert for the aquaculture app. And keeping with the movie theme, I sort of I distilled it down to sort of pre-production, production, and post-production, certainly in the context of making the app. There was a lot of upfront work that went into, one, connecting with the farmers, deciding where to go. Oysters presented themselves as a fantastic industry to focus on, and we were fortunate to have, of course, Whiskey Creek and Oregon Oyster Farm nearby here. There was also a tremendous amount of effort that went into content, having an idea of how the hatchery and the grow out operation work. We can begin to sort of think about how are we going to present this in an engaging way. And certainly Emily and Kristen were tremendous assets there, and they actually did quite a bit of the work on that end. We also learned a lot from Time Loop. A lot of this stuff was new, as you could probably tell by my slides here. I'm a very linear, old-fashioned thinker here, but Time Looper was able to sort of give us some pointers on how to use these new and innovative approaches to delivering the content. So a lot of one more thing, of course, is draft content and sort of a shot list. We want to visit the farm with an idea of what we wanted to capture. So the next step is sort of production. So this is on-site filming and so forth. With 360 video, there's a special 360 video camera. Drones are involved, all these sorts of things. So we went in knowing sort of a baseline of shots we wanted to get. Once you get there, things kind of evolve and you discover new things to film and all sorts of stuff. So we ended up getting a tremendous amount of content. And in the Oregon Oyster site, we did have some of the Teens as Teacher students with us there as well. So that was a great experience for them. Post-production, we're taking all of that footage and all the photos and paring them down to the essentials. We would, want to distill it down just to a couple minutes for each point. Coming up with text and audio that, again, are concise and understandable middle school level. Time Looper, again, we got a lot of input from them on, to some degree, what is possible. We have some of our ideas were a little bit crazy. Some of them actually were a little bit too simplistic, and they would offer suggestions on how to spice things up a little bit. And then there was, as the content expert, there was also a lot of review of the content on the back end. A lot of this stuff, picking out the best photos, working on the text and audio, a lot of that was the 4-H team and the pre-college team that really did the lion's share of work on that end, thankfully. Fortunately, actually, some of that stuff, I didn't have the software to do that, so I had a built-in excuse. But yeah, there's a lot of great photos and content that came out of that. So that's on the app side. Also, as the content expert, there were some great outreach and education opportunities, which involved both the students and educators. And these would be educators who will eventually, hopefully, going to use these apps. But also there was one event, which was a Portland Public School externship, where they wanted someone to come in and talk about aquaculture. So it was a great experience to talk about not only this app, but also aquaculture sort of in a global context, in a regional context. That was a lot of fun too. I've already mentioned we incorporated 2 farms. We've co-located them together in an unrealistic manner, but technology can do that along the bayfront there, or along the Uquina River. Just a shout out to Whiskey Creek Shellfish Hatchery, Alan Barton, who you saw in the app, and Chrissy Smith. Both were fantastic in interacting with us and basically opening the doors and let us go in there and film all sorts of stuff. Chrissy is also the director of the Friends of Netarts Bay nonprofit. They do a lot of outreach, and a lot of the stuff she does includes the hatchery. So we had she had a great perspective on how to present some of this technology that we were looking at there. And then Oregon Oyster Farm was also another fantastic visit. Lucian, if any of you know him, he's a fantastic tour guide. He was very excited about us coming to visit, so we got the royal treatment there. We went out on the barge, the Tom B. You saw the footage of us dredging up oysters. It was a fantastic experience, both from a filming perspective, but also for the Teens as Teacher. There's a photo up there. Teens as Teachers students were also there, and they, as Kristen mentioned, had a great time. Kristen and others also enjoyed some oysters as an added benefit to our visit. So anyways, just some highlights. It was a great experience connecting both with folks at OSU, statewide extension, and industry in putting this whole thing together. So it was fun.
I think so. And while they are all having that much fun, I didn't get to go to any of this. I was behind the scenes, make sure contracts were done, labor distributions were done, that we could actually have time looper, that, you know, releases, risk management, all that you can imagine goes behind of launching something like that. But so happy that we had such an amazing, competent team of people that made this vision come to fruition. A little bit behind the scenes in there, Ford alluded to that, like to get, this is just shows a little bit, there are processes, there are tools that we use throughout the year to figure it out what goes there at the end. This is an example of key facts, right? What are the learning objectives? And believe me, they can attest to that, to sit the experts, the educators, and the IT people to decide what those learning outcomes and key facts would be, was a very long learning process. And that's what our scholarship is. It's figuring that out. It's looking at pedagogy and what is relevant, meaningful for the youth, and how do we nail down an important message in a product like that. So that gives you a little bit of example of that. Then there's like some of the ones, this is an example from the agroecology where the teens were very involved into leading content, writing scripts, filming themselves, taking photo themselves, leading the trip to the site. They did it all as leaders. So they all, you can see their names on the bottom there. They all went through the same process of creating content focused summary, key facts, narratives, and the team did the work of combining those together, merging the important things we wanted to say at the end. So it was a very hands-on learning experience for them that they're not used to having, because they had to take the leadership on creating some of those things. So production sheets created, going to film. This is an example, not from the aquaculture, but from the agroecology. This is the forgot the name now, Oak Creek Center, and on campus in Corvallis, where they have agricultural plots at their research stations. So that's where we filmed. And you can see one first group of teens when we went for a 2-day retreat to collect this content and record holograms and do all that kind of stuff. And there, kind of an example of the work that Kristen and Emily and all of those folks had to do for hours to quality control of everything and choose what goes in what, choose what go in each pin, name those pins, get those kinds of documents that I cannot even begin to understand what they did to get the final kind of example tabletop that you saw with those pins. So I hope you have the time to look through it and kind of experience that. And I'm happy to answer any questions in the end, but the success with this has been tremendous. We have lots of interest. USDA really wants us to disseminate it really highly and continue to build. What else can we do from this? What are the sites can we highlight? What are the kind of agriculture places can we do with that? And that's how it came about. I mean, Shawn being around and seeing how that happens to us, the idea to do the Coastal Hazards app came with a funding from NOAA. And once that's done, it will be added to the platform at Oregon State University, and it will be whatever you're going to call that, Dive for Ocean Literacy. Yeah.
Thanks. I'm just going to speak very briefly about that. We took this whole process to NOAA and suggested that it was a great way to engage communities around coastal resilience to hazards in a kind of small way, as almost like a pilot for thinking about broadly how you use apps for in a 21st century kind of way, actually, to do both regional, local education, but also in our case, educate tourists and visitors. And so we are building on the successful work of Felicia Almeida Schultz, who's become the new hazard specialist for Oregon Sea Grant on the coast, and her Oregon Coastal Hazards Ready Library and Mapper. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you check this out. It's a huge amount of information, including case studies related to the variety of chronic and acute hazards on the coast, from landslides and flooding to earthquake and tsunami. This is one slice of some of the examples, and the app that we're going to be building will be built in a similar way. It's going to look like what the oyster aquaculture app looked like. So you'll be immersed in a slice of the Oregon coast. For the first slice will be regional here, and then there'll be pins placed by youth co-creators, youth who have been trained in the Sept volunteer program, which is the community emergency response teams. So for those of you who know what those are, these are local volunteer organizations that live in working communities and then engage with emergency services after an event or in preparation for an event. There are youth groups for those Sept volunteers up and down the coast. We'll be working with them as the youth co-creators, and with scientists from Dogami and from Oregon State and other places as the content experts. We'll be building out a map that you can walk through with these pins that sort of highlight specific places, specific events, specific information that you need to know or a guest needs to know to the coast in order, not so much how to escape a tsunami, because there's a lot of information about that, what to do when there's an earthquake and tsunami, but how are communities responding to that potential threat and what sets the stage for community resilience after an event, right? What happens 2 weeks after an event and how do communities prepare for that? So that's going to be built out like that. The coastal hazards, wrong one, coastal hazards mapper has a lot of the kind of content we'd be using. This is the specific content on this building that's built into that app. So you can click on the spot, you can get this information about the building. There's actually a huge amount. What the app will do that the mapper doesn't do is allow you to do a 360 video immersive tour of this building, walk up to the roof without even being here, for instance, observe a disaster drill without being here, see where community-based emergency services and caches and supplies are located in the event of an emergency, understand how different communities respond to these threats in different ways, and working with the youth, build out a storyline that helps communicate how resilience looks in this context. So it's not just a doom and gloom scenario, but also a coastal resilience story in a certain sense. We have less than a year to put this together, basically. The funding we have for that, we are building specifically on the processes and the people that made the Dive Frag program possible. We are starting recruitment for youth soon, very soon, as a matter of fact, this term. We will be running the Teens as Teachers program in the winter and early spring. We will be shooting video and building out animations in the late spring and early summer, and we'll have full app development in the fall for release this time by December next year. If you are interested in being involved with any of that, you can contact me specifically. This is the team of people that's working right now. It will look like the team of people that Susan put up earlier. Pretty soon, it'll be a giant list of all the people and places that are involved. Our hope in Sea Grant is that this is the first app that we build relative to community resilience. And what we didn't show you today that Time Looper can do is that once you have these apps built, you could actually work with a community organization, a nonprofit, a school district, a class at Oregon State to build out new content and populate that content into the existing app so it just downloads the next time somebody does an update. So we could literally add case studies in communities and places coast-wide for years. And not have us be the only people controlling that access, but working with communities to do it, which is a huge push for Sea Grant and similar kinds of organizations. There's the QR code for those of you online. You can catch it there. You can catch it with your phone here, or you can grab the sticker before you leave. And yeah, I think I want to stop there. Thank you, Ford. Thank you, Susan, for highlighting how this works and what it's going to look like. I hope you all take a chance to explore it today while you can. Explore it online, download it, it's free. And send us any recommendations, questions, things like that. We do have time for some questions now, so we can have a few of those, and then we'll have time for you guys to play around with the VR sets. They're turned off, so the batteries don't go dead. So while we're answering questions, we'll get them cranked up and turned on so you can access them easily. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you for all of our presenters. We'll start and see if there's any questions online. And if not quite yet, then make sure you're putting your questions into the chat box. Go ahead, Roseanne, if you have one.
Yes, thanks for this presentation. What is the plan to evaluate user experience with the app?
Oh, that's great. That's how I actually got involved with this. Thank you for the question. We're looking at a couple of different things. Those of you who know what I do here, we do a lot of research on learning with exhibits, learning in public programming, learning in school and out of school context. We've been trying to bring what we've learned from that to bear on the apps. And so one of the things that we're going to be starting now, what we've done to date, has really focused more on the experience of scientists, of content experts, and of youth as they are involved in the process of building. So how does that process work? What do they learn from that process? Especially for youth, how do they learn when they are taking on the script writing and the filmmaking and the content mastery kinds of effort? How does that change their understanding about careers, their understanding about themselves, their leadership styles, things like that? So we've got some data on that, which we will be continuing to collect in the future installations. But what we're going to be moving to now is really looking at the user experience. And so it's not just a survey or something like that where, oh yeah, I liked it, it was great, because that's absolutely of no interest, honestly. But really, how do people move around in these apps in ways that's different from the way they move around with that sign, which is posted on site, or with an exhibit in the visitor center? So when you're wearing the headset, in what ways is your experience, literally your physical experience and your emotional and cognitive experience, similar to or different from how it is when you use your iPad, your phone, in conjunction with somebody else or alone, in a guided activity or in a free choice activity? So over the next 2 years, we're really going to be examining that and trying to use that to understand, well, what's the best way to evaluate the success of an app other than the numbers of downloads and the hours people spend on it.
All right, questions in the room. Hang on just a second. Go for a little run. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to try those out after this. I guess my question is, as we're all sort of, returning to in-person classrooms, in-person, work, are you expecting a shift in demand at all in these sort of virtual products? And I guess tied into that is how accessible are these products like VR headsets, iPads? Is that kind of common now in classrooms?
I can't, you can take it, but I take a partial answer to that. Yes, when this grant came about, it was designed to be some rapid kind of delivery for COVID purpose. What we have been noticing as we start disseminating this and training educators to use it is that for youth, they still want to do that. It's the coolest thing in the world for them. They can spend hours on those things and do all of that. But more important than that, it's how we're trying to envision to continue to use this. This is like a 2-minute experience. There is an activity that goes with that. There's something else that goes with that. The closing part of our grant, which will be next year, is the last thing that we're going to do. We're actually developing a virtual challenge where youth teams are going to look, let's say, the aquaculture app, learn the story, and then think about if they were to add another pin, what would that pin be? And we actually have the ability with Time Looper to give them the platform to create their own pins and continue to tell the story. So what Time Looper is starting to see, and I believe what we're going to start to see as people start to utilizing them, is not only the VR sets, but the platform itself, where an educator can have a free account and create it in there, and a student can go, okay, this is how milk is made here in 3 Mile Farm in Oregon. But I'm from Brazil. I'm in Brazil. I'm gonna create the 3D map from this area just by dropping the pins from geographic location of where I am and take my photo, write my recipe about how do I make this, whatever, and upload it to the pin. And they're starting to use it as their own like kind of new PowerPoint, 21st century PowerPoint kind of way, presenting their own ideas of how they create things and think about it by drawing from a library of things that already exist, or going to their backyard and taking a photo of their own garden and putting a story added into that. So in terms of accessibility for these immediate things, this was $1 million grant. So a lot of the money was for participant support. So buying this equipment and distributing through extension 4-H spaces across the state, so they can kind of use it as a borrowable kind of place and build from there. But to be even more accessible, I mean, the VR sets are one thing, but the iPads and iPhones and anything, anybody can download that for free and use it anywhere. So we also built in some extra money, found it to do translation. So at the end, hopefully with the next 4 or 5 months, there'll be a Spanish version of all of it as well when we get that done. We can talk a little bit more.
The only thing I would add to that is there's a really nice study by, I forgot the group out of Portland, looking at access to broadband among youth. And what they found was that Latino youth around the state in particular, 85% had access to broadband through their phone. And so an app is actually an easier, better access for most youth than a Chromebook, right? That doesn't have a cellular connect, or than a classroom computer, which often doesn't have high-speed internet. So apps are in some sense much more accessible than other technologies. And then as Susan says, once youth become creators of content in apps, then you got something that's really interesting.
I think what was very interesting for us too, doing program with you during the pandemic is how hard it was to shift, adapt, learn how to do this all in online platform, but there's so much of it that we're actually keeping. Whether we go back to fully in person or not, there are some elements of things and some other people in communities that we access that we'd never accessed before. So we're trying to keep the best part of it and say, like in something like that, where in this challenge, right? So it's supposed to be all visual. It was part of a requirement of the grant. So when we do that and they create their pins, that they're going to add that to the experience that we created, our intent is to try something even more ambitious. If you ever heard of the metaverse, so when they come in together, instead of a Zoom meeting that they are presenting on a Zoom meeting like we are today for you, we're actually trying to get the kids to come in as a metaverse, so they can be anywhere in the world and they're experiencing this together. So we're trying them out. Hopefully it'll work out okay. And see how these tools that we can use to a certain level and continue to use in ways. Everybody is really tired of visual programming. Educators are exhausted. No one wants to do it. And we don't want to make somebody sit for a virtual Zoom presentation webinar again for another 5 hours. But we have learned a lot about the elements that do work and how can we use that as pre and post experiences that help us increase access to those communities that we couldn't before or couldn't bring it in person.
All right, questions online? Go ahead and give us the first one.
So a question from Elizabeth Purcell. While this app is currently designed for the Oregon coast, would there be an opportunity to expand this to other states, coastal and landlocked, and include other natural hazards, etc., hurricanes, tornadoes?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing, I can just give one example. Susan and I took we run a class on coastal resilience and sustainability in island nations. We were in Puerto Rico in the summertime. We took a bunch of teenagers who collected video of community resilience activities throughout the island. And so this was post-Maria, but pre-Ian. We are going back again this year, follow up with some of that, but we built a time looper built for us, a model of Puerto Rico and already stopped pins on it. So we will be populating in the next several weeks, actually. We're putting in all the content for those pins. So we'll have a Puerto Rico version of this app that focuses on community response to acute hazards and chronic hazards largely from coastal flooding, hurricanes, large scale rain events, landslides, all the things you're hearing about in the news right now. So looking at mangrove restoration, looking at estuary impacts, looking at fisheries impacts, looking at water quality impacts, all that kind of thing. You could literally do this anyway. And we're doing that for about $20,000, $30,000. So you can literally ramp this up to any size or scale coastline or map space you can imagine. Our goal right now is to kind of cover most of the Oregon coast with this app, but with a real focus tight in here, and then search out external funding or additional funding to expand coastwide, Pacific coastwide.
Nice. Any questions in the room before we go to that second question online? All right, go ahead, Michael.
Okay, this one's from Lauren. It was mentioned that a lot of educators are probably not used to using teaching with this technology. Are there tips, guidelines provided for educators incorporating these lessons in their classroom?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's part of the toolkit that we'll be developing right now for our specific diaphragm project. We did a series of professional development for educators, local educators here from Oregon, to walk through the content, how to use it, get them used to utilizing the VR sets or the iPads and how to bring it to the classroom. Also, that's part of the lesson plans that will be published at the end of next year when we're done with this. There'll be lesson plans. There are a part of guidebooks and things that are supportive of educators to use this in a classroom, whatever way they want to. So, and they're all going to be on our website, for anyone to access. So there is a combination of things that got created, from the videos and science cafes through the lesson plans with the guides on how to use it, as well as the opportunity for them to come and get one of the experts to the classroom and kind of answer questions. Some of those other apps that Time Looper created, some of those places they utilize a lot in that way, when there's a museum, or they can actually, educators can request somebody to come and join in and answer questions as they do these experiences. So there's all sorts of ways that we can bring in support. And I think the intent for us in pre-college programs and 4-H is to continue to support. We'll have a set with us on campus. 4-H is have another set with them so that we can continue to use in our campus field trips and other opportunities, and support educators to use them as well.
All right.
Just to add one thing to that, I think like a lot of technology in the classroom, it just can't stand alone. It's a cool wow, it's a cool neat thing, and that's it at the end of the day, unless you've built a context around it. And so I think the number one piece for teachers is understanding what kind of context you can build around it, and in what ways the technology supports the learning outcomes rather than just drives the interaction.
Shawn, can I ask, can you take us back to a slide where folks that are online can go ahead and find the link to? Thank you.
Yes, and after you download and try out the apps, if you have recommendations, questions, ideas about those, you can email Susan at susan.rowe@oregonstate.edu. If it's about the hazards, you can email me, shawn.rowe@oregonstate.edu.
Yeah, and just a reminder, this is a fluid product. We're never done with this. Things can be edited, things can be improved, things can be done there at any time. So anything that you want to be involved with, ask questions, have a suggestion, work together to write another grant because you have a crazy idea about this other site. Crazy ideas did happen. I didn't think we're going to get the grant to begin with, let alone finish this. But we learn a lot together, and I think it's fantastic to see things like that happen when people that think in different ways and see things in different ways get together to come up with something innovative. It's not for everyone. I would say I don't spend a lot of time on that. I would say my 6-year-old was addicted to it when I brought home to try it out. And I thought it was just the novelty of the technology, right? It's a VR set. It's just a cool thing. I didn't think she was actually paying attention to what was in there, right? And as I'm trying to make her sit down and not move so she wouldn't kill herself walking around with that. But at one time she was just like, whoa, 33,000? if anybody knows what I'm referring to, that 33,000 types of cheese exist in the world, and they always start the same way. 33,000. So she was kind of making this comment. It was like, well, she's actually listening and trying things out and paying attention to it. So there's something about the experience, because it's not that exciting of a topic. I'm a marine scientist, so making cheese, not to me that exciting. So, but definitely, I mean, the youth and the kind of little experiments that we've done, they really get engaged there. They ask questions and they want to do more with that. And then for the educators, an opportunity to get a conversation going and then bringing them onto a field trip. A real field trip, doing an activity that we created. We created this activity called Rivets on a Plane for the agroecology that they play with Jenga pieces. And it's about understanding diversity of species and when we lose one species, what happens. So very simple for elementary age kids, but those are the kinds of things that are built around the app. They are complementary things that they continue to have that conversation.
Great. We'll do one more question here.
Thank you. I can see incredible potential. And I think you alluded to or mentioned that you'll be doing teacher training in K through 12. And I also wondered if you would be including like GED programs at community college. Because I could see students completely becoming involved, but of course the educators need to know about how to access it themselves. So
yeah, but that's a great idea. Yeah. We've worked with the educators that we have in our pre-college programs and all of the informal educators as well, not just classroom. So yeah, definitely there's no reason why we couldn't work with EGD and community college for those who want to use this and continue to use as college. Part of, because another goal of that as you go through the stories from all 5 sites is the careers and the potential. And there are satellite things that happen because of this. They're not even part of this grant. So I work with the folks on food science and technology, and we applied for a small pot of money to tell the story of relationships. So while this all focus on the content of how the technicalities of how to make cheese, these are the video that we created with partners like Beeline, Portland Creamery, and all the places around here were about the relationships that they built in the landscape of making cheese, from the producers to suppliers to storefront owners, that kept them together in the time of COVID, and how those relationship building and understanding that place in the landscape is just as important as the technical skills of learning how to make cheese. So those are all kind of conversations that started from this and kind of have evolved in those different kinds of products and things that have nothing to do with the VR set.
All right, I think we're going to end our formal presentation here, but for those folks that are online, go ahead and go check it out. For those folks in the room, if you want to come play with the headsets, come do so. And if you need to step out, then hopefully we'll see you again next time. One more thank you for our speakers, please. All right, everybody, we'll see you next week. Okay, for folks online, we're going to end the presentation now.